Welcome to the 15 Minutes with a Farmer podcast from Successful Farming. I'm your host, Lisa Faust-Prater. Emma Coffman is a first-generation cattle rancher from Temple, Texas, and she is our guest today. Emma has worked in several roles in the cattle industry and is now a full-time advocate for agriculture. Emma was named the 2024 Advocate of the Year by the National Cattlemen's Beef Association for her creative use of storytelling across social media platforms. In each episode, I have a quick 15-minute conversation with a farmer to hear their story and share their experience, expertise, and life lessons. Emma, thank you so much for joining me on 15 Minutes with a Farmer. Well, before we get into your background, I want to congratulate you. You have just been selected by the National Cattlemen's Beef Association as the 2024 Advocate of the Year. That's incredible. So congrats.
Thank you so much. It's quite the honor.
Well, you have such an interesting background and, maybe unexpected as far as the sort of recognition goes that you are a first generation cattle rancher. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your growing up years and how you found your way to ag?
Absolutely. So, as you said, very different background. I'm quite unorthodox. I didn't grow up directly involved in agriculture. My mother was military, dad was in finance. We grew outside of town and we had, some acreage to ourselves, but we didn't run anything. When I had the opportunity through 4-H, I got to see all my friends showing livestock. And that's really where I credit my beginnings of not only the love of agriculture, but exposure to agriculture. Even though the stock show industry is very different than production agriculture, I always will be a big proponent of kids getting involved in the stock shows, whether it's through 4-H or FFA, because both of those programs allow so many different opportunities. And it led me to a lot of opportunities. Ended up taking me to A&M down in College Station, Texas A&M, where I graduated in animal science. I went and studied abroad, worked in Australia for a little bit before COVID. And of course, COVID, everybody's life got rerouted. And then that brought me back to the States and started my professional career, which is a little different in itself too. I started off with nutrition in Virginia. Again, COVID, people were firing, not hiring, and I bamboozled my way up there. And so I was in sales and a consultant for a nutrition company out there. That later led on to an opportunity to come back to Texas and be with the feed yards on data management, Oklahoma, Texas, and New Mexico. Through that journey, once they closed that division, I had the opportunity to go back to one of my clients actually and run his operation as an interim manager until I could find maybe something a little bit more back in the professional corporate field. And that's when I did worked for an IVF company covering 5 states until they closed off that half portion of that division. And then I just said, you know what? We've been already doing the advocacy on the side. Let's take it full time. Now I get to share my story, but also maybe bring other first generation or people who are interested and they don't know how to get their start. They don't know how to even begin. I'm hoping that maybe my story will help those, show them that, hey, you can do this. It's going to take a lot of gut and determination and time. But if you are serious about it, you can do it. And I used to look as my background of not being from a big ranch, big, well-known last name, the quote unquote right pedigree, if you will. I used to look at that as a hindrance, but I have now, as I've matured and grown up a little bit, I think I look back and I actually recognize it as a advantage because I do get the opportunity to travel. I do get the opportunity to phrase and verbalize things maybe to groups that are not really pro-agriculture, rephrase things in layman's terms or in maybe analogies that they can understand. And so I look at that now as an advantage rather than a disadvantage like I had in the past.
Oh, that's amazing. And I mean, it really takes all kinds of people in agriculture to, make this industry successful. And if everyone had the same background, that would just be boring and nobody would benefit from that.
Exactly. I remember in college frantically writing down notes as a freshman with all these basic animal science courses. Most of my classmates are thinking, this is stuff we knew back when we were 5 years old. But I remember looking at what I was writing down and thought, I feel like this is basic common knowledge that we should know as consumers. And they're not teaching that in schools. if they even have, these schools even have an FFA program, I sure as heck, outside of, Farmer Brown that you use in nursery rhymes and maybe a really cool picture on a wall, we didn't really talk about ag. We didn't talk about food or fiber production. Shoot, they took home ec out of school way before I was even in it. And so I think that if you have the opportunity to reintroduce agriculture into schools, I think that will really help consumers, because right now, to put it in modern terms, consumers are being gaslit into buying and whatever they're purchasing. It's packaging. It's a lot of the times it's pretty words or what sounds good. A lot of it's not even a real thing. And it makes me sad because I see the price markup and people think, oh, it just costs so much money to be healthy nowadays. I'm like, well, not really. You're just buying the stuff that has the pretty bottle or the funny looking label or whatever aesthetically pleases your fridge, because apparently that's a thing. So I'm really trying to. Ooh, had a friend. Sorry.
Okay.
I'm hoping that people take the time to really understand where their food comes from and then teach others. And I think that if you're involved in agriculture in any way, whether you're a hobby farmer or that's what you do for a full-time living, it is your obligation to educate consumers.
Well, and you've done such a good job of that too, with just using social media to, promote agriculture and to talk about some of these issues. Tell me about that, like how you kind of got started with that path, and if anything along the way, surprised you, or you learned things that you maybe weren't expecting.
Oh man, and first of all, thank you. I appreciate you saying that. And yeah, the kind of like my career, social media was, so at least my career, I knew I wanted to be in agriculture. The social media was not something that I ever thought I would do. It was actually the ranch I ended up going managing for. I did photography in college, and my grand idea was to throw it up all on Etsy, and then that way you can buy and order as you please, and I get to photograph what I really want. And so this customer of mine at the time, was having a branding, and he invited me out, and I was like, oh, this is great. And he goes, you know what? You need to get on TikTok. And I was like, I remember COVID. I remember my roommates. I remember all the dances and that is not, nope, I don't need to be on that. And he goes, no, this is the new Facebook. And I thought, whatever, dude. And I started making more and more videos. And the next thing I know is I'm on podcasts, and then I'm going to events and people are recognizing me from my content. And again, I try to have my viewer be, I guess, twofold. I wanted to address things for consumers so they can learn, but I also want to bring in conversations and topics that producers can get something out of as well. Right. And so that's really where this whole thing just blew up. And I've been very blessed that God has provided me the different opportunities to go on people's places. And now we're doing this full time. It's W Ranch Advocacy. I've got a podcast / show. Think of Mike Rowe with Dirty Jobs, that style of content, but it's called The Bridge. We're trying to bridge urban and rural communities together through agriculture. And people are sharing their stories every day, not the big names like you see on TV. There's so many more producers than the big names. And, over 84% of producers are family owned and operated. So I wanted to show a true insight on the level of knowledge and science, technique, management practices for consumers to learn the true differences between how their food's being produced. And they can make that choice at the counter, but also producers, they can learn maybe some different management techniques and practices they could implement into their own place. And so I've just been rolling with that, and I've been so, so blessed, and I cannot wait to see where this goes.
Oh, that's amazing. It really does feel like it takes so many people to tell their stories. And that's really, I love what you said about going onto people's places and kind of sharing their stories, because really for folks who have never been involved in agriculture, if they don't have farming or ranching in their family, they've never been to a farm or ranch, it's kind of easy to get swayed by those loud voices that are telling you it's this, when really it's not. Yeah. So just putting a human face to the different, places in production, I think is just so key.
I Appreciate you saying that. And yeah, I think that I would encourage people who are either in the advocacy space or they're getting into the advocacy space to not be distracted by what will go trending. But my real big advice to people is to not fall victim to that fear mongering information style, because you're no better than the animal rights activists. And I know that will probably tick some people off, but really they're playing on emotion.
Yeah.
And if your strategy to market either your own product or to market an idea of changing people's minds, and you think the best way to do that is to scare them, I don't really see that much of a difference outside of one being pro ag and one being not. But what we're trying to do is show a clear and true window. And on our website, we have an information page. And our goal is to have the information resources is as transparent with numbers and removing as much human bias as possible. So if you want to know the true differences between grass-fed and grain-fed nutritionally that you are putting into your body, here are the numbers, here are the statistics. This is not a feel-good article. This is not a, hey, we're trying to market a product article. This is just true factual information. And then if you see a producer on our show that you like, I want to buy that product or service from that person, we have an interactive map that allows you to contact these producers directly. And I think that's really important for us, is to not gatekeep information and for us to open up that road of communication. Again, we're trying to bridge the gap, not divide it even more. And so we're really, really focused on, even if I don't agree with the management practices of an operation, it's my job to let that person talk about why they're doing what they're doing and make their own argument, and then let the consumer and the customer decide what they want to do.
Letting them share their reasons and their thoughts really really can make a difference in just sort of getting the word out there about what's real.
Absolutely. Yeah. And we don't really have any rules on what we don't talk about on our show. And I think that's important because you allow producers to share what's important to them. And we're trying to make a bigger impact. Yes, educating consumers and producers alike, but also policymakers. But yeah, we're trying to make a bigger impact because the fact of the matter is we are feeding and clothing the world. And the U.S. is one of the most sustainable, if not the most sustainable agriculture systems on the planet. And that's not getting enough credit. And so, and that's in our own backyard. There's other countries that see what we're doing and they think it's awesome. But in our own backyard, we need to take care of our own and educate them and hopefully get people back involved in caring about agriculture and actually seeing what we're doing on a day-to-day basis.
Right. And that's social media is just perfect for that. It's like, it's the best use, one of the best uses of that sort of technology. Tell us about your just, a day in the life of you and like what that looks like as far as like still being involved, hands-on in ag and like finding your happy place there. Just like, what is an average, day look like for you?
Yeah, things have definitely changed since I've taken this full time. And I'm a firm believer that God will make you uncomfortable until you move in the direction that He has called for you. And everyone has their strong points. And their different talents. And mine just happens to be talking with people. And so my day-to-day highly changes. So doing the advocacy, what we'll do is I try to plan a trip out, and then we'll stop along the way, usually either half a day or a full day per operation. And then we do some post edits behind the scenes, but we go out on farm, we're filming. In between then, I'm also doing research. So a lot of bill and legislation research, because really that's where a lot of the changes will come, is through policy. And I don't really like to be involved in politics, but it's kind of one of those necessary evils that in order to make change, we need to educate the decision makers. And so, and again, I tell people all the time, if there's something that you don't want or you need changed, call your representative, call legislation. That's what these people are here for. So a lot of policy reading, making sure that the information and numbers and statistics I'm given is accurate. So I do read a bunch of like cattle numbers and reports, any kind of daily informational publications, a lot of podcasts, and then I'm also a relief pilot for some drone operations. So what we but I do public speaking events, keynote speaking. I love teaching and talking to people. So I go to a lot of conventions and trade shows. I would love to get back into showing one day, but and then work on ranches and help out whenever I can.
Oh, that's great. Well, you've done such a good job, and obviously to be, to receive your award and this honor from NCBA is such a big deal. And it's just fun to see how far you've come and your passion for agriculture. So, congratulations on all your success, and I'm just looking forward to seeing what comes down the pipe for you.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. I'm very honored, very blessed, and thank you again. I appreciate that.
Thank you for listening. Please subscribe, rate, and review us wherever you listen to your podcasts. Open the latest issue of Successful Farming and visit us online at agriculture.com for more interesting features and news for your farm. Join me next week for another episode of 15 Minutes with a Farmer.